Paid a lot for these. It's the only time that they pay for themselves. Oh, good. I get to watch my bald spot. That's great. There we go.
Can you hear us now? Okay, we've got a thumbs up. Excellent. Okay, so Chair Losfeld, I think we should be ready to go.
Okay, we're ready to go even though you can't hear us, or you can hear us?
We
can hear you now.
Yes, we can all
Okay.
hear each other now.
All right, sorry. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the annual meeting of the Community Involvement Advisory Committee, as well as the annual joint meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission and Milwaukie Neighborhood District Associations. Agendas are available on the city website at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. Before we get started, we have just a few items to cover. First is our native lands acknowledgement. As you all know, Monday was a national holiday for Indigenous peoples. our land acknowledgement. Following the land acknowledgement, I'll ask Commissioner Heemner to provide a summary from the events held in Milwaukie over the week. The city of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya, etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Commissioner Heemner?
Yeah, we had some technical difficulties with a video we're going to show, so I will just recap the program. It was October 5th, and we had Chris Rempel from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde there. And he walked us through kind of what they call the life cycles, which is seasonal round. So fall, winter, spring, and summer. And that's how they live their lives. So this time of year, they'd be gathering nuts, and the fall Chinook would be coming up. So they would be spending their time gathering and fishing. In the winter, they would be inside their village homes, telling stories. And then in the spring and the summer, again, they would be back out, a unique way of looking at life. And the other thing that he talked about, which I didn't actually really realize until that night, was the federal government actually disbanded the Grand Ronde in 1953 and no longer saw them as a tribe. It wasn't until the mid-'80s that they got re-recognized again. And Chris, the majority of his job is reconnecting the tribes people back to their culture because their culture was lost. And so it is very, very interesting to see how a group of people can lose their culture by other people telling them not to have it, and how hard it is to regain that knowledge again. The video is being edited right now and will be playing on the Milwaukie Heritage Channel, as well as on Comcast Channel 30 here in the next couple of days. So I encourage everybody to check it out. It is a great and really interesting program as well. Chris also brought items with him that he gave demonstrations to. So he brought some really neat things and showed us some cedar bark baskets, a fish catcher thing, and a lot of other stuff. So yes, please check it on out.
Thank you, Commissioner Heemner. Appreciate that. Okay, now we move on into audience participation. This is an opportunity to comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Does anyone wish to comment on an item that is not on our agenda? If you do, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom.
We don't see anyone, Chair Losfeld.
Okay, moving on. Now the CIAC. I'd like to welcome John Hennington to the City Equity Manager to the meeting. John, would you like to introduce yourself and get started with your presentation?
Certainly. Thank you so much, Commissioner. My name is John Hennington. I'm the Equity Program Manager for the City of Milwaukie. I have been with the city coming up on 2 years. And during that time, I think I've had several presentations before City Council, but I think this is my first time before the Planning Commission. So glad to be here and to meet you all, most of you virtually, some of you here in person, and talk a little bit about the work we do at the city in our equity program and how that applies to the work we have as part of the CIAC. So I want to thank Laura Weigel for inviting me to be here, and looking forward to answering any questions you have about our work and how it applies to the work that you do. And we'll just jump right into the presentation. I've given it the pilot-centric name, Plotting the Course, Navigating Equity and Public Service, really an apt description of how equity work can be. There's a lot of figuring out the currents and getting some understanding of just how to adjust as things change. Equity work can be very complicated. It can be very messy at times. It's people work, and it's work around, it's personal work that we all have to do for ourselves, and it's work that takes time to establish in a community. So we are always trying to make sure that we are heading in the right direction, and also willing to be transparent about the times that we need to take a step back, reassess, and move forward. So Ryan, if you could move to the next slide. I wanted to just give you some foundation as to why we have this program. So why equity? The Milwaukie City Council established an equity, inclusion, and justice goal on August 18th, 2020. The Milwaukie 2040 vision calls for a flourishing city that is entirely equitable, delightfully livable, and completely sustainable for all residents. Commissioner Loosfeld read the Native Lands Acknowledgement, and as coming in the week after Indigenous Peoples Day, it is an important reminder that we are not the first caretakers of this land, and that we have a responsibility to be stewards, as were those who lived before us. So that's part of why this is so important to the city. We are not the first, and we will not be the last to care for this land. And so doing so equitably allows us to make a more sustainable community for everyone. Next slide, please. So what is equity? One of the questions I get frequently in this work is, what do you mean when you say equity? So I've got an imperfect, but I think a fun illustration here. It's by Tony Ruth, based on The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Many of you probably recognize the concept there. And for those of you, I know the frames are a little small, so I'll describe what's there. The first frame, top left, we have inequality. Our apple tree is a little bit, we'll call it a cherry tree, we're in Milwaukee. It's a little crooked, and all of our fruit is growing on one side. So we have someone who has easy access to it. It falls right in their lap. We have someone else who, on their side of the tree, not so much is happening. The second frame is equality, and it's what happens when we provide everyone with the same tools. So in this case, we've given both of our people a couple of ladders. They're exactly the same height. For the person who already had the fruit falling in their lap, they really have great access now. They're right there in the tree. The other person, it doesn't really quite help them very much. It's still not doing the job to give them access to the fruit. The bottom left panel is equity. It's when we provide custom tools to meet the needs of the inequality, actually address what's happening and how to repair the damage there. So in this case, we've given a slightly larger ladder to the person who's on the bare side of the tree so that they can actually access the fruit. There's a fourth panel here, and that's justice. That's fixing the system in the first place to offer equal access and to both tools and opportunities. In essence, we straighten the tree. That is a very simplified explanation of what equity and justice work is. It's recognizing where there are inequalities, where there's harm, and hopefully over time actually repairing the damage so that those inequities go away. But recognizing that that's not instant work. You can't just straighten a tree. It takes years to do that. It is a long process. It's work that we do individually over years. It is work that we do as a community over years and decades. So that is my very, very simplified explanation of equity and why we do it. Next slide, please, Ryan. The equity, inclusion and justice program with the city began in June of 2020. And we sort of set three big phases to get started. The first was learning, supporting, and sharing. This was in the summer of 2020. Most of you remember that was a very difficult summer after the murder of George Floyd and the unrest that followed. And then a lot of soul searching and a lot of discussions about how we could be better, be a better community, be a better state, be a better nation. And so the initial phase was really figuring out who who our stakeholders are in our community, doing outreach to those communities, holding listening sessions, really being visible, and trying to just get our arms around what it would be to have an equity program in the city of Milwaukee. Phase 2 began right about the time that I started here, with a lot of focus on policing. That was what we heard a lot about from those listening sessions. And we spent a lot of time with our police chief, with members of city council, with community members, to have discussions about how we do the work we do, how it impacts our communities, and how we can be better at that work. Recognizing that there are all sorts of ways to do policing. We have an amazing department with some incredible officers who are dedicated to this community. And so a lot of this work has really been building bridges between the officers and the community they serve, so that everyone recognizes that there are common goals there, there's a common sense of purpose, and that there are things that can be done better. And so that's been an ongoing discussion and conversation. We're still building those relationships, but it's been really amazing seeing how those bridges are slowly built between members of our community and the officers who serve our community so well. When we got into May of 2021, we started moving into our third phase, which is the phase we're in currently. We established the Equity Steering Committee for the City of Milwaukee. They meet on the fourth Thursday of every month. They're online. They also have some meetings here in person at City Hall. And the focus for the Equity Steering Committee has been to advise council on issues involving equity. We also are in the process of building a community survey, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end, as well as a citywide equity plan. So right now we're moving towards plotting the course for the next 2 years and how we move on from here in terms of equity. So our goals, and this is where it comes down to how this applies to the work that you do on the Planning Commission and the work that you do on our NDAs. Our first goal is equity and service to the community. Thanks, Ryan. It's reducing inequities in the provision of city services based on race, gender, sex, sexuality, disability, and other individual characteristics. When we talk about equity, there's often an assumption that we only mean race. And while the city has centered race in these discussions, equity really is about all of the characteristics that make us individuals. It's all the things that make us unique, and it's all the things that can potentially set us apart. It's about finding those things that people sometimes are treated differently because of them, those characteristics, and addressing those the biases that lead to excluding those individuals. Next slide, please. The second goal is equity within the workplace. That's a focus on recruiting, retaining, and empowering city staff from communities of color and other historically marginalized communities in order to build a workplace that is equitable, just, and welcoming to all. This is a big focus for us as an employer. We are a small city in terms of our staff, but we lift a lot. We have a very, very busy staff that serves the community in so many different ways. And what we have found is that when the staff reflects the community that they serve, it benefits everyone. And so trying to make sure that we are recruiting talent that comes from all different backgrounds to bring their unique experiences. It makes us a better organization. It makes us more responsive to the communities we serve. And it helps us hear the communities that have not always been listened to historically. And next slide, please. Our third goal is equity in our community. To collaborate with local agencies, organizations, and institutions to facilitate equity, justice, and inclusion actions throughout our community. That's a lot of the work that we do in terms of our events. It's a lot of fostering relationships, working with partners, and building bridges between organizations. We have a lot of organizations who are interested in equity, and what we see our role here at the city is to help bring those groups together to foster conversations and growth around these topics. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to talk about equity lens a little bit because when we do our work as a city, all of the work we do, every department, there are different things that we need to consider as we serve our community. An equity lens is a shortcut to prompt some thought about the impacts of the work we do, how we make the decisions that we make, and how we can make better decisions. So this is certainly not I could spend hours talking about equity lenses. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of what an equity lens looks like and how it can be applied to basically anything that we do. So next slide, please, Ryan. So simple equity lens. This is a very, very, very basic set of questions. This is not the equity lens. This is a version of an equity lens. And so asking questions like, who will this benefit or harm? Whether that is a policy, a plan, a program, a decision, simply who will this benefit or harm? Will anyone be disproportionately impacted? Is there a history of harm that should be considered? How can that harm be mitigated or eliminated? Does this create an undue burden? And what are the alternatives? That is a very, very brief equity lens. So when you hear me talk about equity lenses, that's really what we're talking about. It's a series of questions that anyone can ask themselves about literally anything that you're doing, to think about who is actually benefiting, who could be harmed by this, and is there another way to do it? It's a decision-making tool that really asks you to take a step back, slow down, and think about the impacts of the decisions we make. As a city entity, we have an enormous amount of power. And when that power is used to the best benefit of the community, really great things can happen. But when we make decisions that can harm people that we don't typically listen to, that's when real damage or harm can occur. So this is a very brief way of looking at an equity lens, but when this is applied to everything we do, it allows us to apply this to how we communicate with people. It allows us to make sure that we're reaching people that we don't normally have interact with us. So if you change these questions around a little bit, instead of who will this benefit or harm, who are we missing? Often that's the question that we forget to ask. Who did we miss? Who did we not talk to? Who doesn't actually trust us enough to come forward and share their views on something? And so that's, again, an issue with harm. If you have communities who have traditionally been marginalized, it's very difficult to then have the trust for those same individuals to come and share their views, because if they feel they're going to be discounted, they're generally not going to bother. So it's going out of our way to make sure that we're reaching those individuals, reaching those communities, building trust, building a relationship, so it's not just a transactional approach, but we actually are building a lasting relationship with these communities. And then finding ways to ask these questions. Will this help you? Will this harm you?
John?
Is there a better way? Yes.
John, I apologize for interrupting you, but I'm wondering if we can work on the mic feedback that folks on Zoom are hearing.
Oh, no.
It's kind of fuzzy and scratchy and.
Thanks, Commissioner. See if that,
Yep.
if that need better. I apologize. Thanks for letting me know.
Pause here and see if we get it out.
Laura, it feels like it's getting worse. Oh.
I'm not exactly sure what's going on with those parts.
Okay.
I am muted. Actually, I'm not even connected to
Right, I know you're not asking.
How's that? Is that any better?
No.
I'm here.
Is it perhaps coming from the AV room itself?
What does that mean for us?
Would it be possible if we mute all the mics and mute everyone and see if that solves?
Do you think we could do that? Mute all of the mics while, that maybe.
I don't hear it.
Now the question. Can hear us,
Can you hear us?
not really,
No.
nor can you hear them.
About mute all but John's mic?
That. Everyone on Zoom.
John, you want to try speaking again?
Sure, absolutely. Commissioner, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's not very loud, but we can still getting the feedback.
I'm wondering if everyone in the Zoom is currently muted.
Except for myself, yes, but I don't think that is solving it for us, unfortunately. I think it's something on your end.
Probably so. Just sort of grasping at straws.
The moment is to shut down the meeting and restart it because we're all muted on Zoom and we're still getting feedback. So if we.
Laura, I think I heard you suggest that we call back, we leave and call back into the Zoom. Okay, do you want us to do that now?
Yes.
Okay. We'll try again.
10-minute break.
I'll make a motion to make a 10-minute break. Second. There we go.
Never happened before.
All in favor?
Right?
Sorry, we didn't make it.
Oh, we didn't have quorum.
You didn't have quorum. You only have one.
We had the floor, then we had the whole.
Online. And so I
Very good.
this is well,
You're in charge now.
fellow back.
Teresa was on.
Present.
Elvis, who has a history. I have a name disadvantage. And he used this whole thing to make it like the centerpiece of the call.
Name advantage.
Is muted, but Milwaukie Planning, can you hear us?
Exactly. So we are really trying to encourage people to participate, to get the more people.
somebody represent, because I'm pretty sure all the leaders were.
Yes.
I live just outside of Milwaukee. I live, I live right on the edge of Milwaukee. Working on that. Actually, I just saw a place available, but I love the area. Awesome. Too big quite a pair. Children's library, it was fantastic.
Oh, no.
Yes.
We can hear you, but it's an awful feedback.
I'm going to speak full volume. Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, no, not.
let's give it a go.
Hmm.
Could you talk some more just from the room?
Absolutely. I'll read the last line here. Who will this likely benefit or harm?
Okay, sounds better. Let's give it a go.
Okay.
Although we can't see your face, I don't know if there's anything that, and we're not seeing your presentation either, but does it make a difference? Can the AV room go back on mute? Are we?
Can,
John, are you still there?
I am still here, yes. You still
John?
hear me?
Now we can't hear you at all.
Oh, no. I hear the feedback. Can you hear us?
The feedback is just really bad and we can barely hear you. And
So weird.
right now, the Milwaukie planning and the AV are both on. I just wonder if we test muting one of them.
I don't think so.
Okay, John, can you try talking again?
Sure. How is that? Is that any
Okay,
better?
this is good. This is good. Just talk
It was the
talk
TVs
loudly
in
and
the
then
room.
show your presentation.
John is a utility infielder.
Only takes one genius, right?
Actually, it was all credit to Jason for that. Okay, so thanks for your patience, everyone. So we navigate the joys of technology in the post-COVID era.
That's right.
Okay, are we ready to keep going?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad we'll be able to hear you now.
Perfect. Well, thank you, and thank you. Thanks everyone for your patience. This is actually about the time that I was going to pause for questions about the equity lens, but I wonder if I shouldn't just push to the end, and then we'll see if that's a good time to do that. So we'll pivot from the equity lens to the inclusion and belonging study that the city of Milwaukee is undertaking. Next slide, please, Ryan. So the city of Milwaukee is partnering with Keen Independent Research. They're a group that is based, their main offices are in Phoenix and in Denver, but they are a 24-person firm around the country. They've done a lot of work here in Oregon around equity, and we selected them to conduct an inclusion and belonging study for the city. The reason why we're doing this work is to get a better and clearer picture of who we are, where we are succeeding in our efforts around equity, and where we have more work to do. So this is a big undertaking for us. I'm really looking forward to this process. I think it'll answer a lot of questions about who we are as a city. I think it'll probably raise some issues that we haven't thought of, but hopefully it gives us some opportunities to come together around some of the challenges that we face as a community in a more united way. And making sure that as we push towards that vision for 2040, that we're bringing all of our community members along. So we're looking forward to this study, and I think that particularly those of you who are participating from the NDAs have a real opportunity to help spread the word and increase participation. And hopefully one of the impacts of that process will be getting more of a relationship with members of the community who may be interested in NDAs, but really haven't found a place for them to connect. And maybe this is a way we can start to build those relationships. So whether someone has the capacity to be part of their NDA, to volunteer for a board or commission, or just feel more comfortable sharing their views with the city. This is both a opportunity for us to learn and again, an opportunity to build relationships with our community. The leads on this team for the study are Dave Keene and Annette Humkeen. They're the principals with Keene Independent Research. We've also been working with Blanca Monter and Dr. Nicole Yates. Dr. Yates is the lead on the analysis for this study, and more the qualitative side, and Blanca is more the quantitative analysis for the study. Next slide, please. So the philosophy that we're approaching the study with, and this is something that really this slide is the key reason why we're partnering with Keene. They look at the many dimensions of diversity and equity. I mentioned earlier that there's often a lot of assumptions that when we start talking about equity, we mean race or we mean gender. And we certainly do mean those things, but really there are many dimensions that create the unique individual that you have standing in front of you. So it's race, it's ethnicity, gender, immigration status, sexual identity, communication style, sexual orientation, age, physical and mental ability, religious affiliation, lived experience, and so many others. All of those elements are things that can bring people together, and they're also things that can cause people to be set apart or isolated. So when we think of equity in that sense, when we think of diversity in that sense, that it is all the elements that are a person, then we can start to look at ways to make sure that we're hearing all of those voices, that we are really seeing who our community is and responding to them in a way that is equitable. So next slide, please. So major goals for this study is to work with city stakeholders to develop an evidence-based DEI plan, diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, that builds on existing progress that the city has made, and to help guide us in terms of what services we perform and how we perform them to better reflect equity. The methodology for this study is ongoing meetings with city leadership and other stakeholders, reviewing existing plans and data, a DEI survey, interviews and focus groups with staff, and virtual workshops for community input. We are in the phase of looking at our documents, our plans. These researchers are probably tired of hearing from me. I'm dumping all sorts of paperwork at them. And they're doing analysis on that. And we're about to move into the more public part of this, which is why I'm talking to you about this tonight. I discussed this with the city council last week. Next slide, please. The next steps for this study, right now we're in the middle of procurement process analysis. So we're looking at how we purchase, who we contract with, how we make those decisions. The city adopted new purchasing rules back earlier in the summer. And so they are looking at actually those rules as we were implementing them and looking at our past history in terms of purchasing. That includes some interviews with procurement staff. We'll also hold a virtual workshop with contractors who work with the city and those who bid on contracts and maybe didn't get the contract. It's an opportunity to get a sense of where we can grow, what we can do better, where we're succeeding, and where we're falling short in our goals. We're going to do the same thing internally, looking at the culture of the city. So we'll have an employee engagement survey that has gone out. We do that every 2 years, but we're adding to that a virtual workshop with our city staff. That includes people who used to work for the city. The virtual workshops are really, it looks like a survey. It's not a survey. It's not what was your opinion of working at the city? Score 1 to 5. It is a question, a prompt about the experience of being a member of this team. Did you feel like you belonged here? What are some of the things that made you feel valued? What are some of the things that made you feel not valued? And building a conversation around that. That is how we're approaching gathering that information about our communities. The goal of this is to have more information for you, for the Planning Commission and for the NDAs, to better understand your neighborhoods, the city as a whole in terms of the Planning Commission. We hope that we have some tools from the feedback that we get from these workshops to give you a better sense of what Milwaukie really is, who we are as a community, and where we can grow in terms of equity. And so the third piece of this is the public piece. We will have the same virtual workshop for members of the public. That will go live sometime in January. It'll be out about 6 weeks. During that time, we hope to get as many people involved as possible. So I would really encourage those of you who are in NDAs, particularly, to talk to your members in the community about this, encourage participation. We want to hear from as many people as possible to really get a sense of what life is like in Milwaukie. And then to give us some direction on where we need to go to meet our overarching goals for equity. So. I won't talk too much longer, open it up for questions. So just wanted to really give you an opportunity to understand what we do in terms of equity program and also how we view equity and how it can be applied to the work that you all are doing in the community. Any questions?
Chair, I've got one.
Yes.
Okay, sure.
It's Robert.
There we go. Hey, Commissioner Massey, please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, John. That was very informative. My question is about the workshop versus the survey.
Sure.
How do you chart your progress or lack of progress over a period of time, whether that's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, if you're using workshops? I kind of understand how you do it in surveys. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you do it in workshops.
The virtual workshop is, and the name there is really about the style. Ultimately, it works the same way a survey does. We will get information that we can track. However, we are gathering both quantitative and qualitative data in that process. So if we just do a survey where we get scores, we're going to get scores, which is great for measuring progress over time in terms of your quantitative data, right? Our satisfaction is this. We've met this target, we've met this percentage. But when we're talking about equity, one of the things we need to do is actually find out who we're talking to. What are those aspects, right? So we're approaching this without making assumptions about where there might be issues, where we might be falling short. And so what we're looking for are patterns. And so we chose a firm that has a really well-proven track record in taking that qualitative data and turning that into data points, looking for patterns, and then giving us a sense of both, here are some quantitative figures that are really easy and very clear. Here's what your workforce looks like compared to all of the people that you could be hiring in a certain radius. That is certainly helpful, and that's the easy stuff to track. The qualitative really gives us a picture of what are the patterns? What are we hearing frequently from the community, and what are the characteristics of the people who are saying these things frequently? And based on that, then that gives us a course to plot forward. It's trickier. It's one of the things I say equity work can be messy. It's not as easy to measure. It's not as clean and clear as some of the things that we traditionally measure. It's harder. It's a bit more nebulous. But by comparing the qualitative and quantitative data and coming back to it over time, we hope to get a better, clearer picture of what
Good to hear the city is contracted, it specializes in this, because these kinds of things are very hard to do well.
Yes.
I mean, they're easy to do, but they're not easy to do well. So I'm glad to see that. And my last follow-up is that, I think one of the goals of what you're doing and the committee is doing is to reach out to underrepresented groups. And so how do you get underrepresented groups to participate in this public outreach? Because we haven't been that successful in the past. So it's pretty important that we get them into these workshops.
I completely agree. One of the reasons we are doing the virtual workshops is because it allows people to do this on their own time. One of the things that we have found, I've worked closely with Adam Moore, who is our Parks Development Coordinator, who's been doing a lot of work on the 3 parks projects that are currently in development. And part of that work has been spending a lot of time doing outreach in the community and finding different ways to reach people where they are. One of the things we have learned is that a pandemic has completely shifted how people interact and how people spend their time. So it was already really difficult to get underrepresented communities to participate. It is harder now. And one of the things that we have done to shift our strategy is to really give people the opportunity to respond in their own time. So the way the virtual workshops are set up is that once you get the link, you can go in, you can get started, you can think about it, you can take a break, you can come back to it later, you can do it at 2 in the morning when some idea strikes you, and then you can submit it. And so by encouraging people to really engage and take the time to do that, it makes it a little easier rather than saying you need to show up at this time, give us 2 hours of your time, all of that. It's also meant to be done fairly quickly. What we have found is that if we can get to people and tell them, hey, this will take you 20 minutes. If you want to take more time, we will set up a time and call you. And our researchers are actually set up to do that. So if someone wants to actually call and they just want to chat about something for a while, they'll do that. They'll sit down there and listen to them. We're trying to meet people where they are. And that requires sort of approaching this from different ways. So we'll have some in-person community activities around this, but a lot of it is really just going into those populations based on relationships we've built. A lot of it, actually, I'll be reaching out to the people we've connected with over these parks projects and saying, hey, thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate it. I have one more ask for you. I need you to give me 20 minutes to tell me what your experiences have been and where you'd like to see us go. So that's a big piece of this. So you're going to see a lot of information about this survey and this study out in the community, but it's a lot of finding trusted voices in the community and saying, hey, I need you to give this to 5 of your friends and then get them to give it to 5 of their friends so that we have a better picture. But it's hard. This is a lot of boots on the ground kind of work. It takes a lot of time. It's pretty labor intensive. We have researchers who are dedicated to the work. And it means I'll probably be knocking on a lot of church doors over the next few months. But basically finding people where they gather. We'll be hanging out at the schools. We're building relationships with the PTAs and trying to spend time with them. Any way that we can get the information out and get responses back in, we're going to be doing it over the next few months to get a good picture.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I have a question and a statement as well. Chair
Sure,
Elizabeth.
go ahead.
First of all, if you haven't had a chance to meet with John one-on-one, I suggest that you do. Not only is he fascinating, but his work history is actually really a great conversation. So thanks, John, for everything that you've done and everything that you and I have discussed in the past. My question is that 5 years ago, it was LGBT or LG, whatever it was, and then the T, and then the Q, and then the plus, plus, plus. And now it's, it was originally DIE, then it was DEI, now it's DEIA. When you are living in a world where language is not quite set yet, right? How are you navigating with the new terms and new terminologies that are coming through? And how does that either strengthen or weaken, the process?
First, thank you so much, Commissioner, for your comments. And I'm always happy to meet, so feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to talk about my weird path to landing here in Milwaukee. But that's a great question. Language always changes. I'm not a linguist, but I find language fascinating and the history of words and how we choose to communicate and describe ourselves. And the history is far more interesting and twisted and strange than my work history. What I have found in this work and talking to colleagues in equity work is that it requires 2 things. Listening to the person who's in front of you. Trusting that individual to be the best representative of their lived experiences. So I worry less about labels. We had a fantastic conversation here in council last year about the term BIPOC and whether that term was properly capturing people. And ultimately, the answer is probably not. There's probably not a term that's really good at capturing all of the things that make us unique individuals. The more important thing is to make sure that we are building relationships with people so that wherever they're coming from, whatever their identities are, and no one has only one identity. Everyone is made up of many factors of that list that I showed there of what we consider in terms of diversity. And so I focus more on the individual, and I encourage others to do that. And I think that for all of you and the work that you're doing and serving a community, it's focusing on the people in front of you and recognizing that in an NDA, when you represent a particular community, you have all of those people who pass by you every day. And when they're passing by you, they are all many of those things. They are all, their own selection of things, and maybe they're even still trying to figure it out, what their identities are. I think if we focus on the individuals, if we focus on really being present for whoever is in front of us, really listening to them, and building a relationship around community and growth and common goals, I think that that's the best way to approach this work.
John, I just had one question for you. Can you tell or describe for us where the goals that you've outlined, where were they derived? Was there a process in forming the goals or a group or a body that directly developed those with you. Can you just speak about that for a moment?
Those goals, that's a great question. Those goals came out of, and I would say those are not rock solid, permanent goals. They are reminders of where we are, and it's pulled from a few sources. The primary source is the council resolution that was passed in 2020 that established the equity goal, as well as conversations with community members and with our equity steering committee. And so those give us they're a shorthand for here are areas that we are trying to focus on in this work. And we've tried to sort of simplify all of the things that we can do and distill them down to those areas. It doesn't mean that that's all inclusive. It doesn't mean that because it's on the list, it's not something that we wouldn't consider. It is, as going back to my response to Commissioner Hamer, it is nebulous work, and really we're focusing on being as inclusive as possible, but looking at areas where we understand there have been historic inequities and trying to address those.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Commissioners, Commissioner Sherman?
Yeah, thanks, John, so much for your presentation. On the topic of goals, I was wondering, could you remind us kind of briefly what that first goal was that you pulled up on the slide? I had a kind of a comment question for you on it, but I just can't remember the exact phrasing of what it was. And you don't need to pull it up. You could also just read it if you know what it is.
Certainly, Commissioner, and I apologize. It's a little bit difficult to hear you, but I think you asked for me to repeat the first goal, and that's equity in service to the community. And for that, the statement is reduce inequities in provision of city services based on race, gender, sex, sexuality, disability, and other individual characteristics.
Great, thanks. I'll speak up a little louder. Hopefully that works. When you were sharing that, I think one of the things that I was thinking about is, I know sometimes community members can find Planning Commission to be a very technocratic place where we're asking them to provide testimony on the applicable criteria, and individuals might not understand kind of the nuance of the land use planning process and some of the legalese. And I wonder if you have any thoughts or recommendations on how this space can become a little bit more equitable to some of our community members, which is, I think, some of our topic tonight with NDAs as well.
Great question, Commissioner. Planning is particularly challenging for two reasons. One, there's a lot of highly technical language that's used in the planning world. One of the things that we've tried to emphasize lately has been the use of plain language. The state of Oregon actually has, there's actually a state law that requires all state agencies to use plain language. I'm happy to share some information about plain language with the commission, but it's challenging because plain language really requires that you communicate at somewhere around the 4th to 8th grade level. And that's really hard to do with planning language. And I've struggled with trying to figure out how to make planning language in particular more accessible, because there are certain things that have to be written a certain way. And so, I'm probably going to get, terrified looks from behind me when I say that one of the things that we may want to look at is, I have seen some entities that use sort of, here's the technical thing that we have produced, right? Here's the document, and then here's what it means. But that means you have to basically do everything twice. And that's really labor intensive and very difficult for a smaller city. So I don't know that I have the answers. I will say that I would be happy to work with our planning team and with the commission to consult around some of that and to bring some resources in. But it's a very difficult thing. I will say that any way that the meetings can be made to feel less intimidating, for people to feel like they are welcome in the room, that it's a space where they're there to be, they're there as members as the community, not as people who are being challenged on whatever they want to do. That helps. But this is a hard thing. And I said there are two reasons. The other reason is that planning has a pretty awful history when it comes to exclusion. And I assume that there have been some discussions around redlining. If not, I'm happy to come back and talk about that and the history of land use in Oregon. But that's a different conversation, and that's a deeper dive. But there are a lot of people who feel very intimidated when they enter a space around planning. And so they just try to avoid it. And so really some of that is dealing with the historical baggage. And the other part is trying to make the language as clear and accessible as possible. So I think there's opportunity there. I will say that one of the things that we've asked our researchers to look at is the planning process. And so hopefully we'll get some recommendations around that. They are familiar with land use in Oregon. They've spent a good amount of time here. And so hopefully they can bring in some of what they've learned in other communities as to what has worked and what didn't work so well.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, thank you, John, so much for your presentation. Appreciate that. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, commissioners. Thank you so much, our NDA members, all for your time and your service to the community. Really appreciate it and look forward to speaking to you all in the future.
Just one moment, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
There it is. Okay, we are getting a little bit of feedback, but I think we just keep going. Now we will, I think if we put AV room on mute again, that would be good.
We will ask the AV to turn it up so that we can hear you in the room. It provides feedback, so we can't actually hear you all very well. We have to lean in very hard to everything, so there's something odd going on. So we'll just turn it down and try to listen really hard. So if you can just speak up very loudly when you talk to us, it will make it somewhat easier for us.
Okay, Laura, I'm sorry for everybody on Zoom because I think you can hear me loud and clear, which is going to be a little painful. But Laura, it's hard to hear you, but I'll just speak up. So moving on to the joint meeting with the NDAs. Now we'll move on to the annual joint meeting with the neighborhood district associations. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here today. First, I'll give a brief overview of the agenda. Laura, are you still there?
Yes,
Okay, are you able to give a brief overview of the agenda?
yes, I can.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a little review of the work plan for planning and the planning commission, a 5-year work plan, so everybody has an idea of what's coming. And then we can talk a little bit about some follow-up from last year's meeting. And then also we're going to talk about an update from the high-profile development projects. We heard from some of the NDAs that they wanted an update on that. Then we're going to talk to the NDAs, and then we're going to have a roundtable discussion with a couple of things. Jason Wax is here with Engage Milwaukie. He runs that platform. I know some NDAs had talked at the quarterly meeting about wanting some updates on that and talking about barriers to feedback for the Planning Commission, and then just general topics that you'd like to discuss with the Planning Commission. So that as an overview of what's ahead.
Thank you. All right, well, before we get started with the presentation, I'd like the NDA members in the attendance tonight to introduce themselves and state their NDA, if you would. And Laura, are they participants on Zoom as well as in the room, or?
We do have 2 participants. We're going to promote them to panelists as well, but we'll start with our guest here in the room.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm Teresa Brissaw. I'm with the Lake Road neighborhood, and I'm a land use member. So, and I recently, Lake Road's had a complete change of all the officers, just recently, all of them. Well, except for
Oh,
Paul
wow.
Hawkins. So,
Well, thank you, Teresa. I appreciate you being here. I see a new face here on Zoom, Rebecca. Would you like to introduce yourself and your NDA, please?
Hi, everyone. Rebecca Stevengerd. I'm with the Llewellyn neighborhood.
Awesome, thanks. And Singh, would you like to come off mute and introduce yourself and your NDA? Okay, while we're waiting for Singh to come off mute, I wonder, commissioners, if we want to do a round of introductions as well and maybe state the NDA nearest to you or the NDA that you, if you do live in the city of Milwaukee, which NDA you are within. I'll start. My name is Lauren Losfelt. I've been a part of the commission for maybe the last 3.5 years, I would say, and have chaired for the last 2 or almost 18 months now. I live just outside of the city limits, but Island Station is just across the street from me, my neighbor. And so I'm happy that you all are here. I'm going to pass it over. Maybe Joseph, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Joseph Edge, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission for the last couple of years. I live outside of the city in the Oak Grove neighborhood, and I'm the Chair of the Oak Grove Community Council Community Planning Organization, which is the equivalent, the county's equivalent to the city's NDAs. And I'm also on the board of directors of the North Clackamas Watershed Council, which is located in the Lake Road neighborhood association.
Commissioner Freeman?
Commissioner Hemer, do you want to go next?
Oh, yep. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's right. Commissioner Hemer.
Commissioner Hemer, I have been on this commission for almost a total of 8 years now, 7 3/4. I am also the secretary of the Linwood NDA, which then tells you I am in the Linwood. And I get the pleasure of traveling around and speaking to each NDA every year for a couple of organizations, generally asking for money. So I get an opportunity to see them all and know them all very well. And welcome, I know Carla and Debbie, so.
yes, oh, good.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, Commissioner Freeman, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Commissioner Josh Freeman. I've been on the commission for a couple months. I live in the Linwood neighborhood, and I'm happy to be here. Welcome.
Commissioner Sherman?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob Sherman. I live in the Ardenwald neighborhood. And when the Ardenwald NDA was meeting in person, they're meeting in person very close to my house at the Milwaukie Cafe and Bottle Shop. Pleasure to be.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ernst?
I'm Amy Ert, and I live in the Linwood neighborhood area.
Awesome. And then Commissioner Massey?
Hi, my name is Robert Massey. I'm in my 4th year on the commission. I previously served as chair of the commission, and I'm in the historic NDA.
Okay. And then let's see. Singh, are you able to introduce yourself? I see that you're on mute. Oh,
Yeah.
There we go.
Sorry, I'm actually not an NDA representative. I saw this email invite, so I'm just attending to hear, and see what's going on in this meeting. That's all.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, Laura, with the introductions complete, then I think we can begin with the presentation.
Okay, great. Ryan is going to share the screen so we can just look at the 5-year work plan that's coming before the Planning Commission and all the work that's going to be going on in the city. It's the same work plan that you've been looking at for the last few years. It's just that some dates move around depending on how fast and slow everything goes. The great news is when you see things grayed out, that means we did them. They're done. And that has a lot to do with all the work that folks have done here. So I appreciate that. So we're getting ready to kick off the transportation system plan. I think everybody is aware of that. That project should start at the beginning of the year, and then we're due to wrap it up at the middle of 2024. The neighborhood hubs project has been simmering on the sidelines, and we have been working on a scope of work and hiring a consultant, and should be kicking off that project in the beginning of the year. So we'll be going back out and talking about the neighborhood hubs project a little bit more with everybody. A lot of work has already been done on that, so we're building on the work that has already occurred over many years here in the city. We're also currently looking at our housing needs analysis and our housing production strategy. And there's been a survey that's recently been out on the city's website. So if you haven't had the opportunity to take a look at that, it should take about 10, 15 minutes to complete. We're trying to get an understanding of folks' housing needs here, and then how we can provide strategies to better meet those housing needs in the future. And that project's been going on now for a few, probably 6 months now. We'll be wrapping up towards the middle of next year. Then the downtown design review update is something that we've been started going through here at the Planning Commission. It was many years of work with the Design and Landmarks Commission to take a look at our review process in the downtown design and the design review. And so we are really getting close to hearings for that and getting some changes made. They're not substantive changes to how we approve or build things in the downtown. It's just more kind of a reorganization of things to make it a little bit more simple for the review process, both internally and for developers. And then we're also in the middle of looking at our high density residential zones. And so there is going to be a little bit of information about that in the pilot. And we're also going to have a hearing coming up. The Planning Commission has spent a lot of time over this year looking at that. Then, so that's kind of the work that's on our plate at this very moment. And then looking into the future, starting next year, we'll start looking at our natural resources inventory and code update. And we'll also be looking at our flood protection code at the same time as that. That'll be a 2-year process. It'll probably happen between 2023 and 2024. I guess that's a 2-year process. And then kicking all the way into 2024, we're looking at our parks and institution zones and updating our Willamette Greenway code. Then we start to look out to 2025, and that's when we look at consolidating. We have a bunch of different plans for the downtown area, and some of them are really outdated, so we want to get all of those consolidated into one larger plan. And then we would also be looking at our historic resources update, and so all of that is in 2025, 2026. Then you'll see some items down here in yellow. Those are things that have been coming down the pike that do have implications for the city and have come out of the state. And so we've been looking at our electrical vehicle charging code. We've also got some rules coming down around climate friendly and equitable communities work that's coming out of the state. So we'll be looking at our parking requirements here in the city and making some changes to that. Then we're going to be looking at our sign code. We've got some annual housekeeping amendments for our code. We'll be looking at our variance process for our code. And that is kind of a quick overview of what's coming for the Planning Commission for everybody out in the community. And we will be doing lots of advertising and lots of survey work and lots of online engagement for the neighborhood hubs, the transportation system plan. And we're currently doing that for the housing needs analysis. So please stay engaged and be looking at Engage Milwaukie and looking at the pilot for more information about those. And that is it for the work plan. Does anybody have any questions about that? Commissioners? All right, I'm seeing no questions. So then I just wanted to give a brief overview. Chair Losfeld, I'm sorry, I see you talking, but I can't hear you. Please.
Just commentary that I'm glad things are going out in gray and that we're crossing things off.
Me too. Thank you. Thanks to all of you all. Thank you so much. Okay, so there were a couple of things that came out of the joint meeting with the NDAs last year that I just wanted to give a little brief overview. So folks wanted more detail about submitted applications. So we kind of reorganized the application page on the city's website to say what the application is, what neighborhood association it's in, and give a little brief overview of that. And I think we got some feedback that people had looked at that and thought that that looked better than it was, because it used to just be kind of a number with an application without too much information. So we've tried to give people more information. So they want to go find out about something, it's easier to find. So we did that, and we're always open to making any more changes if anybody has any ideas about that. We also revised our Land Use 101 presentation and had a work session with the NDAs, gosh, I guess back in the summer. Ryan put that together. And then we've also had that available on the city's website, and Jason was kind enough to send that out into the NDA newsletter that goes out every Friday to remind folks that it's there, and if anybody wants to take a look at it. And then we will always also continue to refine that Land Use 101 and move into the next phase of what that next deep dive of information might be, depending on what people are looking for. And then we have spent a lot of time reorganizing the planning department's web pages, but I think our work there will never be done. But we're trying to get them to where there's not so much information on there and make it more streamlined and less duplicative. It's a little challenging with the site that we have at the moment, but we're doing our best to kind of get things a little bit more organized based on what we heard from folks. So that was just a quick recap of some of the work that we did since the last joint meeting. And then, if there's no questions on that, yes?
Laura, question. I think at one of our most recent planning commission meeting, we had asked about when the Land Use 101 might be offered again in person. Have you been able to identify any opportunities for that?
We haven't offered it in person yet, and I'm sorry, I misunderstood. We've been doing it online, so you can look at the seminar. But we could do it. We could offer it in person if that is something that folks are interested in. We have no problem doing that. So that's something that we could do again. Maybe what we'll do is do that at the beginning of the year. We could do that in January, because we're starting to get into kind of weird holiday times. It gets a little busy for folks, but maybe we can look at January and hosting that. So that'd be great. It'd be a great opportunity.
Excuse me, at the leadership meeting, that was specifically mentioned, that they would like to have at least one live session because they felt like they benefited from the interaction and the questions and answers.
Perfect. We're totally happy to do that. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Sure.
Chair Bessie. Okay, and so we'll make sure that happens in January. Thank you for the reminder. And then I think what also came out of the neighborhood association meeting that Commissioner Massey went to was a request to have an update on high-profile development projects that have been going on in the city, because a lot of things come through the Planning Commission and then you don't really hear much about them. And so I have a little bit of information to share just to kind of give a quick bullet point of what's going on with all the stuff that we've talked about over the last few years. And if I miss any, let me know and I'll tell you what I know. I might not be able to tell you everything, but so I'll start with Coho. Everybody's familiar with Coho. That project, it's 195 units in downtown. The development team has obtain an extension on their due diligence period just because of some issues with supply chain and the COVID pandemic. So they are a little bit further out than we initially thought they would be. They are also getting ready to submit an application for the floodplain for FEMA. So that takes quite a bit of time to get back. So they are working, but construction, we're not exactly sure when that is going to start, probably sometime in 2023, 2024. That's the status of it as far as we know. Henley Place is currently under construction and it is estimated to be complete in early 2024. And I think that was around 170, 180 units. Hillside, which is the big redevelopment here, affordable housing, which is a really great project here in the city. They are deep into their approval process. They're refining their plans right now for phase 1, and their permits they think will get submitted in the spring. And the construction will begin on phase 1 in 2024. That's the first phase. It's 275 units. So they'll get through that first phase. They're getting all of their fundings, and then they'll go on to the second and third phase. Monroe, which is now called a 7 acres development, that is up and under construction right now. And so that should be handed over to the owner sometime in the late next year. So you'll start seeing people move into that sometime next year. Dogwood Station is one that came through the Planning Commission, and it was hopefully going to be an affordable housing development with 55 units. They got all of their land use approvals, but they haven't moved forward with anything quite yet. And I think that those are the big ones that have come through the Planning Commission in the last couple of years. And so I don't know if there's any others that you have any questions about.
Is there a written list of what all those you just stated?
You know, there's not a written list in a kind of digestible form, but I could make that a written list and I could send it out to you all. Okay. That would be helpful. Okay, I can totally do that.
Perfect.
Commissioner Sherman?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Laura, I don't remember the name of the development, but Providence was looking at one where you might remember, I think myself and maybe a few other people felt like we were putting variances forward before we knew all the details in order to help them potentially secure some grant funding. What is the status of that project?
They are still looking for grant funding, I think, but they are still dedicated to moving forward. I just don't know that they've made it through that next step yet, but that is still hopefully on the radar. Good question. I forgot about that one.
Commissioner Edge?
Thank you, Chair. One other project that was kind of big was the multi-phase apartment complex at Waverly.
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry.
That was a planned development approval.
I do. I have that on my list, but I just didn't mention it. So thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Edge. It is, phase one is 32 units. You know, it's overall, it's going to be 100 units. They are under construction now. We don't have kind of a finish date, but they are under construction at the moment.
Chair, Robert here. Can I?
Yes.
So, you know, for the benefit of the NDAs, Laura, would you sort of explain, you know, once a land use application is approved, generally how long do they have to complete it? Because I think there's not a lot of knowledge about that because we see these projects go in and then they kind of go through fits and starts and stops and that kind of thing. But there is a time window that they have to start and complete, I believe.
They have to start.
Yeah.
And they have to show that they are making good faith efforts and they are moving along. And I think that that is a 2-year timeline that and I don't quote me on that. I would have to go back and be sure
Is
about
it 2 years? I thought it was actually longer, but it's 2 years.
They don't have to have anything constructed by 2 years. They have to show that they are making progress towards getting to construction before they have to resubmit something to the city to prove that they're actually moving forward with the project.
You know, I think there just may be some assumptions that they don't see any bricks going up, and so they just don't know if it's still a valid project or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a little tricky because every single development is different. Some people get the land use approval and boom, they go straight to it. And then others, they don't quite get started as quickly, or others have complications or looking for funding. So there's kind of this wide scale.
And they have a lot of flexibility in how they achieve that. And so it's kind of impossible to give a brick by brick, scorecard for all of these projects. That's not really the city's job. That's their job.
Yeah.
But they just kind of have some dates major dates they have to meet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chair, if I may, I have one more project I'd like to ask about.
Yes, please go ahead, Commissioner Hemer.
What about the retirement house on Rusk Road? I saw them flatten out the land, or I've seen them flatten out the land. It looks like that they have pipe out there, but.
I don't know the answer to that. That has been started in fits and starts. I know that they went past originally kind of that 2-year. I think that there was kind of a lull in construction financing. They were having a little bit of difficult time, but I think that that's just a project that seems to be moving very slowly. And I don't really know much more than that.
Okay.
It looks like it stopped.
Yeah, I mean, pipe is just sitting on the ground.
You know, just thinking about a project like that, which hasn't really moved forward, although I think the city did allow them, against some people's concerns, to do some fill of floodplain areas. I just want to make sure that maybe, developer won't be able to come in at some point and be like, oh, we want to do something entirely different now that we've filled part of the floodplain. Can you help us understand that those things are probably entirely off the table?
I think if they wanted to do something entirely different, there's a couple of routes that would go. Like you can have a minor modification to an approved development plan. You can have a major modification. But once you get above and beyond, if it's a major modification, it would probably come back to Planning Commission. Minor modifications, not so much, but major modifications. So if it's something that was very different than what they originally submitted, they would have to go back through the process.
Okay, Laura, I think I'll move on to the next piece here, which is to ask the representatives from the NDA just to speak briefly about what you all are working on. And if you could just, maybe Rebecca and Teresa, if you could just share a little bit about what's currently going on with your NDA. I'll ask Teresa in the room if you could start, that would be great.
Sure. Well, as I said, all the offices are new except for Paul Hawkins, who's been land use chair for a long time. So we're having our meetings at Milwaukie Floral, which is a very good place to have meetings. Brett Kelfer's coming tomorrow night to our meeting to talk about the land use, residential moderate density. People probably know general things, but they need to know more details. Also about accessory dwellings, garden sheds. It helps people to know in advance because people want to save money. They don't want to have to pay for permits. So they want to know what can they do so they don't have to pay money, but it's legal. They want to do things legal. Let's see, but we do have a lot going on tomorrow. Someone from the council's coming to talk about the North Clackamas Parks leading, City of Milwaukie leading the park district. So I've already heard two different things about that, two different things. That's Scott Park. The presentation there, they did that at the end. And then the playground presentation, they did that also. So I've heard it twice now. So anyhow, so they are busy with things like that, and no true secretary yet. Actually, the co-chair is doing the secretary job. There's a lot of work involved with doing all of this, all the organization. Anyhow, I think people are having a good time getting to know each other. That's important.
Okay, great. Rebecca?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
It's just a little crackling.
The feedback is on the AV room side. Maybe if the AV room wants to go on mute, that would be helpful.
So the Llewellyn NDA, we started going into hybrid meetings last month. So we're meeting at the Kairos Church in person, and then we have a Zoom option. So tomorrow night will be our October meeting. That'll be the second month of hybrid. But the first one went fairly well, pretty good attendance. And I think people are appreciating that there's also, a virtual attendance option. I think folks may have heard updates from, from our membership over the last year, maybe year and a half around TSP planning, leading up to the city's work around transportation systems. So a subcommittee of the Llewellyn NDA has been doing some survey work and talking with neighbors and organizations and businesses in our neighborhood to get an idea of some of their traffic and safety concerns. So we had originally thought that each NDA would have a couple of representatives to the TSP, but now folks that are interested in that process are applying through the city's process. So we had an update around some of those things at our last meeting. That subcommittee was successful in getting us a PIP grant from ODOT. And so then that funding is a partnership between Llewellyn Elementary and the Safe Routes to School program and our NDA. So we've been doing some activities around that to keep us busy. If you participated in the Carefree, Car-Free Sundays, our NDA had a booth that was set up at Ball Michelle Park, kind of demonstrating some of the traffic calming or slow down options, the infrastructure that could be improved around schools. So we had that. Also at Bon Michel this summer, we had the summer concert series. And I know that our neighbors in Ardenwald also had concerts this summer. So we had 5 summer concerts. And that was nice after a couple of years to get back into the parks, seeing folks. Another opportunity for us, and we'll be discussing that more this week, is the solstice that's coming up on December 17th. And so traditionally the Llewellyn neighborhood has been a driver of some of those activities and the concessions that are present. So we'll be doing that planning. And I think the call has gone out to other NDAs. If others are interested in doing concessions and fundraising for their NDAs, that's an option. And let's see, the only other update that I have from us is that we just completed our quarterly cleanup in the neighborhood this last weekend. So it was a small but mighty group, and just doing kind of, adopt a road trash cleanup along Stanley and some of the smaller neighborhood streets. And that's us for now.
Wow, that's quite a bit that both groups are doing, but I appreciate you both sharing any updates there. Are there questions that the commissioners might have or anything that you want to tag on to those updates?
Maybe just a small update to tag along. I know that some of my neighbors at the Ardenwald NDA, I think, were inspired by some of Llewellyn's work around transportation safety. And so there's also a survey that was distributed here in the neighborhood, and Alvis Clark has been kind of spearheading that and has gathered some of those results, and I believe has shared them with the city engineer, I think, to again try and help inform some of the TSP process.
Awesome. We'd like to then start discussing a couple of topics underneath what's item number 6 in the packet. So Jason Wash, the City Community Engagement Coordinator, is here to discuss the Engage Milwaukie. And Jason, if you're in the room.
Yes. Hi.
Okay. Audio is still oddly a little kind of.
Can you hear me okay now? If I get a little closer.
It's better when you get really close to the mic.
I'll stay as close as I can. So yeah, I'm Jason Wax, the city's community engagement coordinator. And one of the topics that came up at our NDA leadership meeting, which was on September 29th, was Engage Milwaukie. And this is an online engagement platform that we created, I think it launched in October 2020. I think the first project that was on there was City Hall and kind of what to do with the building once we move. There was also the comprehensive plan implementation phase 1 kind of kicked that off. And for quite a few years, we had talked about having a more robust online presence for engagement beyond just SurveyMonkey. And so at that time, we looked at a few different vendors and chose Bang the Table is the company that actually creates those platforms. And what I want to make sure folks understand is that it's a platform that's very more robust than something like a SurveyMonkey. We went through a long process of trying to figure out how best to use it, and really what our goal was to create an online community of engaged people that we could talk to, engage with project by project. We did a Portland State study back then, and one of the things that we saw was we're doing a decent job with engagement. We're doing, a lot of good work, but we don't know who we're talking to. So, one of the goals of Engage Milwaukie is to really ask people to register and collect some of that information about folks. And once people are registered, then they're able to engage on all the different things that we put on there over time. So, we started with 0 folks. We're up to about 966. People that are registered. We haven't seen people leave once they're registered. And we're really excited about hitting 1,000. Actually, we were thinking about having a little, party or something like that. We want to get to that point. But one of the things I wanted to mention about it was it has about 9 different tools for engagement. I've really encouraged all the city departments that use it to maybe go beyond even the survey tool. There's forums on there, there's stories, there's news feeds, there's all these sort of different tools to get people to talk to one another. And in February of this year, I gave a much more robust update on Engagement Milwaukie to City Council and kind of where it was. And I know the NDAs were kind of interested in who was using it. And I actually took a look, and Ardenwald, Lake Road, and Historic Milwaukie are the top 3. So, I guess that's a challenge to the other NDAs to maybe get more people registered. But right now we have the Milwaukie Housing Needs Survey. There's the 3 developing park projects currently on there. We have Home Avenue, Wood Avenue Improvement Project, and are giving folks updates on that project as it's proceeded. And then some of the ongoing projects are like City Hall still on there. The body worn camera program, the police used it to have a conversation with the community about implementing those. So yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress, but people sign up just about every single day. Every time we have something of interest to folks, like the housing survey that's on there, we see an uptick in people registering right away. In fact, I think since we put that on there, we saw a really big jump of about 50 new folks registering to get involved. So that's kind of how we've been able to grow the community, is hopefully someone comes on and they're like, well, I don't want to register quite yet, but if they see something they're really interested in, that will propel them. The other thing I just wanted to address real quick is there is concern on the site about having a registration as a barrier. And if we've heard that a lot. We did a lot of research before we made the decision to require registration. And we look at that really for this particular tool as not a deterrence, but actually that's really the value that we have in that tool, is to the idea of being able to engage with people project by project and having a sense of who they are demographically over time. So, and the other part is I just want folks to keep in mind that we don't collect personal information. You get the email, there's a username, and there is demographics collected, but we don't collect things like names, addresses, phone numbers, that sort of thing. So that's probably longer than I wanted to go, but I just wanted to make sure you kind of have an understanding of that, and just encourage people to use it and go on there and register. And if you ever find anybody that's does not want to use that particular tool, all the projects always have a person listed, an individual staff member listed to contact. And, folks can definitely reach out to that person, and we'll find another way for folks to interact on a project.
Chair, Robert here.
Go ahead.
Jason, I think what I got out of the NDA representatives at the leadership conference was the one thing they were interested in is how many members of my neighborhood are participating. And so can that information be provided? Is it a good idea, a bad idea, a too hard idea?
Yes, I can definitely do that. The last time I did a comprehensive look at like that was at the city council meeting in February. Yeah. The reports that are built into the site are great project by project, but for the entire community of people that are registered, there's not an easy way to pull that data, so it's a little bit more time intensive, but it's definitely something I can provide. Like I said, it's all cumulative data. There's no individuals identified, so I can definitely.
Yeah,
I can pull those numbers.
I'm not asking you to do it for me. It's just what I thought I heard from the NDAs.
Yeah.
And so you're plugged in with those folks, and you guys collectively can figure out what you want to do, if anything.
Absolutely.
But there's some information that's, non-personalized, anonymized, that you could get them.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's actually a survey on the site right now and it's an NDA survey, and ask questions about like why people are getting involved, what's keeping them from getting involved. I did actually extend the deadline to the end of this month. So if folks want to go on and take that survey, that's going to be provided to the NDAs, and then everybody's going to have a chance to kind of hopefully learn from it. And I think the data that I've seen so far, there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of good comments about why people are getting involved, why they're not involved, and quite a few people taking it who aren't involved, which is what I was hoping to see, and why they're not. So we'll probably have a discussion about that in December at our next NDA leadership meeting. Yeah.
All right, Jason, I see that Commissioner Ernst, your hand's raised.
Hi, yeah, I just tried to log on to Engagement Milwaukie, and one of the challenges that I have is, like a lot of people have a lot of emails. And so if I can't remember and it's not saved, I got a new phone, I'm using a different device, I'm having to like go through. I'm glad that it tells you, no, it's not this email, gives you that little information. But if there's a way to sign on with phone number or to, forgot which email I used, that might be helpful too, because honestly, I didn't even log in to do the last survey. I tried a couple times, and then, if you can't get it the first or the second time, you kind of just give up and move on and circle back later. That's been one of the challenges.
Yeah, I know we all have fatigue when it comes to passwords, emails, all of that. I definitely agree. I will say, if anyone, I can look up someone's email. I can't see passwords and that sort of thing, but I can probably help someone if they want to contact me about, what email was used. I probably can help there. If that's
Is there a way to have an option for a phone number as a login?
I can look into it. I'd have to ask the vendor that question. I haven't ever seen that as an option, but I can definitely take a look.
Commissioner Freeman?
Oh, sorry. One more thing. The sign-up process isn't something that we can necessarily change. I mean, it has a lot of, project by project, I can build those sites, but in terms of all the back-end stuff, I can't really do a whole lot.
Commissioner Freeman?
Hi, Jason. I just wanted to know, you mentioned briefly about the barrier of having to register to comment and take surveys on these different projects and stuff. And, we just sat through a presentation with our equity manager about all the hurdles about marginalized communities voicing their opinions. And I just want to know if you guys had some discussion with the equity manager about this specific issue. I just think about for somebody who's, has a history of distrust of government organizations that connect their information, they see that you have to register and then they're just out. And then they don't register and they're not involved. We don't hear their voices. And those are the people we're trying to capture. So I just want to know if you've had some discussions with the equity manager.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think we do look at Engage Milwaukie as one tool. It's a tool, and it's not a perfect tool. When we first created, there was several other goals we were also trying to get at. And we do recognize that registration can be a barrier for sure. But I always tell, anytime we jump into a project, we can't just rely on this one tool to reach everyone. We have to also think more about, now that we can, more in-person events, providing potentially paper copies to folks if they need it, possibly even calling and just telling us how they feel about it, personally, over the telephone. So I definitely recognize that barrier, but I think
some of the conversations we've had with the barriers, it's this is an easy way for them to get in there, and they come and they hit a roadblock, so they're just stopped. Some of these other methods for them to get access are also hurdles. And this is a hurdle. This is something they can do from home. They don't feel like they can, be stopped. So I think you might want to seriously look at that and weigh the pros and cons of getting that information from the people who are potentially out there that you're missing.
Yeah, I definitely can. We can consider that more. I think what I want to make sure people understand about one of the major benefits of having registration is that when we launch a new project, we're not always starting from scratch. We instantly have the attention of this community that we're growing. We start out with zero, and it's just like social media. Over the years, Facebook, people that follow us on social media grows. We're just really trying to grow this community so that when we have project by project, we're able to sort of say, can you come back and help engage with us? And we're just going to have to also look at some other tools to get to those folks. And that's kind of what John's work is hopefully going to help us look at. Because I completely agree. There's people who aren't going to engage with us online, really no matter what in some instances. So we just need to give people all the different options that we can come up with. So.
Jason, can I add to that just before I move on to Commissioner Sherman? I just wonder, in other outlets, you are sometimes allowed to sign in as a guest to avoid the direct registration, or sometimes you're allowed to sign in under different alias, whether it's your Gmail or through Facebook or whatever it is. I don't know if there's something else like that where could help facilitate this, but I definitely understand what Commissioner Freeman is saying, whereas the other options that are listed are not nearly as easy and something that could facilitate really like a quick interaction with folks, and maybe prioritizing what could potentially be a one-time interaction over the ability to have them kind of recorded as members with Engage Milwaukie. Maybe just the one touch point is more important than having them fully registered in our database. If I'm hopefully I'm not speaking for you, Commissioner Freeman, but at least that's what I kind of understood. Commissioner Sherman, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think maybe it's a comment and a question. I think one, on the comment side, I think one benefit of something like Engage Milwaukie is the ability to understand responses by kind of demographic profile. And then hopefully, I think the city is wanting to privilege some of those historically underserved voices in the decision-making process. So maybe that, I think, is my comment. I would just be curious, though, to know whether or not any of the feedback that people are providing is ever shared back out in aggregate. Like, here's the city coming back and saying, here's what we heard from you all about City Hall, or here's what we heard from you all about Scott Park. So far, I think I've seen the information coming into the city, but I haven't heard it necessarily reflected back out to folks. I'm wondering if that's possible or in the works or things like that.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And we've done some of that, but I think it's actually something we talked about in the NDA leadership meetings as well. More reporting back would be something we should definitely be doing. We're learning from this tool just as much as anyone else for the last couple of years. And I think more reporting back is definitely something we'll be working on for sure. Yeah, I apologize that we got caught up in this. There's a whole lot of other information that I could provide the commission with related to the rationale behind, when we set this particular site up and the benefit of requiring registration. There's quite a few studies, bang the table studies, other things like that we followed to get to the point that where we are. And while we do hear some folks barriers, we also have a lot of really, really engaged people on the site. So we do find that as a good benefit. So,
Jason, I'm sorry, I'm just going to dig into this further. Is there a challenge in being able to reverse course or undo some of that to allow greater flexibility? Is that the way that it's been set up currently? It just doesn't allow the flexibility for both.
You can't set up a particular engagement tool to do both. It's not possible. As I mentioned before, our major goal is to get a community of online engaged folks. And as we see it continue to grow, the benefit we're getting from that is really great. And the fact that these folks are plugged in and we're able to see who they are, we can tailor our outreach to folks that we're missing. There's lots of other things that we can do. And if we don't know who they are, project by project, we're starting over from scratch each time. So as soon as we launch a project on the site, we instantly, within minutes, have people engaging. We would not have that without this online community of people, so.
We have a question in the chat, and I'm happy to say it for you, Rebecca, or if you'd like to.
Yeah, thanks. I can elaborate a little bit, and I just wanted to echo what Commissioner Freeman was bringing up. And I don't want to speak for you, Josh, but what that rang for me is the need to blend our outreach tools in with a conversation around equity, to look at how the default that organizations can take can actually reinforce systemic barriers. I think that's, I know that when things are rushed or we're looking for like how we can get information out to a very large group, or even, Jason, as you were saying, within minutes of posting something that folks are engaging. But I'm wondering, are we able to really sort of disaggregate those data and figure out who is engaging and who's not engaging? I think it would be helpful to use some of the questions that John mentioned in the equity lens portion of the conversation to maybe do like a debrief or an audit of how that platform is used. I think, I remember the conversation that happened at the NDA leadership table, and there were, I think that there were some questions around how NDAs are using that tool and what the representation from neighborhood associations look like across the board. So I appreciate, the top three, I'll take that back to our NDA, but we also know that neighborhood associations are not representative of our communities either. So I don't know, I just wanted to second what you were saying, Commissioner, and appreciated that.
If I could just, annually we're going to take a deeper dive into all of those types of demographics, and we can see who we're missing and who we're engaging with. That's what we did at City Council in February. So if anyone's interested in that conversation, it was, I believe it was February 1st. And that's something we'll be looking at annually as we move forward. So I wasn't prepared
Commissioner
tonight for a in-depth study. So.
Maybe to just to pivot a little bit, and I think reflect on the conversation. I think, maybe to ask the question of planning staff about some of the big projects we have coming up underway, and thinking about engagement on that and how we are hopefully trying to engage community intention around transportation system plan, other things like that. Hopefully we're not just picking on Jason, and I don't think we're picking on anybody. But, I'm just trying to think and reflect how we can make sure that some of the policy making we have done and continue to do also remains open and available, and how we're focused on removing barriers for community members.
And if I could just respond to that, Chair Listfeld.
Yeah.
I just want to say, yeah, Jason's been really clear all the time, because we talk about this question all the time. This is an internal question that we have, and it's something we've talked about it a lot. And so Jason's always been really clear in all of his communications with us. It's like, this is one tool. You have to dig deeper in other areas to try to reach out to folks, which is something that we really have been taking a lens to do as part of the transportation system plan. We have hired a group, our sub-consultant, to do very specific targeted outreach to those groups that we know that we're not talking to. We did that with the comp plan. We had several focus groups outside of the regular channels trying to seek out additional input from folks. So we are aware that Engagement Milwaukie is not the end all and be all, and are building in other opportunities for engagement in our plans. And we'll continue to build upon that as much as we can with the work that John and the Equity Steering Committee is doing, and with what we're doing with our consultants. We have a real dedication to trying to to reach out to more folks outside of kind of the channels that we know already work. We've got to be looking for other channels as well, and that is definitely a focus of our work.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Jason, for your presentation and for answering our questions. I appreciate it. I'm going to move on to the next topic of discussion. There's really two topics that I'd like to cover, and first is to our NDA representatives. First, are there any barriers that you all see to providing feedback to the Planning Commission on land use applications? Are you hearing from folks about any particular concern or maybe even frustration about how to engage projects and the Planning Commission on current work?
Well, my neighbors in Lake Road, I'd say very few really want to be involved. They may want to know information. And sometimes when they care enough, they will do Zoom and try or write comments, but they feel like they're not really being listened to. Or a couple of them though, they did say, yes, I am being listened to. It took me a long time to agree with the tree code, for example. But some people still didn't think that was right to do that. So it's putting more burden on the average homeowner. The costs are going up. But as far as involvement, I'm probably going off on a tangent. But as far as involvement, if they think it affects them personally, then, and if it's something they think they may have an option to influence someone, they will be involved. That would be like a subdivision next to their street or their neighborhood, the park. So the 3 parks. So people are involved with that. Majority of people don't have a lot of time. They work, they have children. And so it's mainly the retired people that are involved on a regular basis, I would say. There's probably some exceptions to that. But in general, that's kind of the way I've seen it over the years. So anyhow.
Okay, thank you, Teresa.
I do think the planners do a great job. Ryan Dyer, Ryan did a good job with the vacation rental, with what he sent to me as a land use member of Lake Road. It was great. He answered all my questions, so I was actually very pleased with his efforts to get the answers. So.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. I'm just to note that the feedback on the mic is getting worse and it's kind of accelerating. I don't know if there's a way to put you all AV room on mute again, but I'm going to ask Rebecca. Rebecca, same question to you. Are you aware of any challenges or barriers?
No, I think there are some folks in our NDA that pay attention to land use conversations or decisions that are being made. Certainly we hear from neighbors if the decision is affecting them or is adjacent to them. I will get calls every once in a while as the chair to talk through, how folks can learn a little bit more, or who they should reach out to the city. But largely, we're not spending a lot of time in our meetings going through related discussions.
I'm curious if you would go a little bit further, Rebecca. Do you think the reason there's not much discussion about it is because there's a lack of interest, or is there a sense that the Planning Commission, the member of the Planning Commission and the city staff have got this handled, and there's maybe a sense that the outcome may not directly impact them? Why is it, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess, it's the conversations that we have are kind of at both ends of a spectrum. On one side, folks want to get updates in general about things, and you can largely find that either on the county or on the city website, emails that go out, if they come to a neighborhood district association meeting with questions, a lot of times there will be folks at the meeting who have already accessed that information and can synthesize it and answer the question, and then they, that's taken care of. The other end of the spectrum is if they're connected to a land use decision, or they've had an issue with something that's going on from a land use perspective in their neighborhood, and they need some sort of more highly technical expertise, then we'll direct them to planning staff. In some cases, there will be like with 43rd Avenue, there were some misunderstandings around, mailboxes being put back, in some street work and things like that. So those came to us, and, in that situation, it was more like our role was to de-escalate a situation and then get them connected to the right staff person at the city. So it's more of like a, I guess, first line of customer service when neighbors are confused about a process. We'll get some neighbors occasionally who will advocate one way or another on a land use decision. And in those cases, we've sat with them either in person or on the phone and gone through the application, not providing advice in any way, but helping to sort of decipher what some of the, like a staff report might say. And then the next step is to put them in touch with someone at the city. So it's really kind of like just navigating the process and some of the language. I mean, I heard John mention that as well in terms of how accessible the language is around planning and land use. There are a few of us who have experience with planning and land use and that terminology that are in our NDA. And so we're the ones that get the call.
Okay, great. Commissioners, do you have any other questions on or topics, anything related to barriers to the Planning Commission you want to dig into any further? Commissioner Sherman?
I don't know if it's well, probably is a barrier, but I would love to just maybe take a moment reflecting on our some of our testimony process with people, members of the public, when they show up and testify. And I know I think as part of our script often make this pointed statement about please testify only on the applicable criteria. And I feel like that in and of itself is a barrier. And if we turned the timer on for 3 minutes and somebody wants to say the national anthem over and over again, like, let them do that. Let's not just focus on, does it meet this setback or that setback, or the kinds of things that, folks might not just have the expertise to kind of hone in on that. And so I think sometimes that that strong technocratic focus that we, I think, bring to it, becomes a little bit of a barrier just in and of itself. So anyways, I wanted to just raise it as maybe a topic of conversation, thinking that opportunity for public testimony should be an opportunity for public testimony for whatever the person wants to talk about. So I'll close there.
I know I don't think our city attorney is in the room, but I am definitely have a sense that there is an area there that could be a challenge for us, where if someone were to speak to any part that's not part of the applicable criteria, and then that starts to inform the Planning Commission, or it's how then that becomes part of our decision, or is something that could be appealed, becomes challenging for us. But I understand what you're saying. They should be able to use that time to discuss their concerns about the project.
Yeah. And I hear what you're saying, Chair, and I think that's where it's probably incumbent upon us to not let an individual who hates the color blue start influencing our thinking. That's where I think we have to be disciplined and say, your dislike of the color blue is nothing about the applicable criteria, but you can still tell us that you're upset about these kinds of things.
Right.
That might just be the nuance that I guess I'm thinking about there.
Vice Chair Edge.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this is basically what Commissioner Sherman was just bringing up is, kind of what I think about. When I reflect back on, before I was on the Planning Commission, when I was involved in the community planning organization, Oak Grove, not quite on the board of directors yet, but getting involved in land use applications. It can feel like your voice is not relevant to the decision-making process. And unfortunately, in some cases, that's entirely true. And it's because it's a really prescribed legal process. And, and what is important, I think, to Commissioner Sherman's point, or maybe it was you, Chair, that was bringing this up, but what's important is that we should strive to not give the appearance or possibly give the appearance that we, as the people making the review authority, making the decision about an application, are considering anything other than the relevant approval criteria in our decision-making process. That's how we protect the constitutional rights of property owners who come to us with an application to use their property in a way consistent with the law, is that we follow the law in rendering a decision about whether to grant the permit or not, and what conditions to attach to that permit. And so it is very important that we not give the appearance that we're considering evidence that's not part of the due process of reviewing that particular permit, request. So that's a difficult thing to navigate as a non-planner, as a non-lawyer, as a layperson. It is a very challenging thing to navigate, and when even in my CPO, we continue to run into that sometimes, and so anyway, it's a challenge, and it is. I would absolutely call it a barrier. What feels like a barrier to providing feedback is the feedback I provide even going to be heard? Is it going to have any influence? And that can be very discouraging. So I think, the planning or the land use 101 training is important. The communications that the NDAs give to the community members about what the process is and how they can influence the process is really important. Mm-hmm. I know I probably do things a little uniquely, in my community planning organization, but, I have a team of volunteers, very small team of volunteers that helps me with the land use application reviews. And we kind of prepare a staff report light and actually make a recommendation about what are the areas where, there's actually some room to influence this particular application. And then we might talk about some of the other stuff, but really just in the context of we can't really influence the application in this way. So in what way can we influence the application and have a positive, and ultimately influence and hopefully have a better outcome as a result, but still within the law, still protecting everybody's constitutional property rights. So that I think that, that would be a challenge to the NDAs perhaps, is to kind of bring a little bit more of that, discussion and education to the public about how can we really use our voice in a way to influence an outcome. And then again, the script that we say that Lauren reads, does say, try to focus on non-repetitive information and the relevant approval criteria. And that's so that we can hear your message, it's so that we can focus on what we can actually do and everything. And so there's a balancing act here, obviously, and inclusion and hearing people is very important, but also honoring our system of constitutionally protected property rights and everyone's having a constitutional right to due process of law before we take those rights away from you. Those are, that's a very real thing, and we have to honor that. But it's a balancing act, and I have to operate on both sides of the table every month, and it's tough. It's tough, but we need to try to work through it and continue to influence things in the way that we can.
Thank you. Commissioner Ernst, your hand's raised.
Yes. So just to kind of add on to this, I get a lot of community members that come up to me in the community and they are frustrated about this or that. And it's, and I just take the time to say, the Planning Commission doesn't have any say which business goes into the, business down the street from your business, unless it's coming in front of us, to apply for a variance or something. We don't see it. We don't have any control over what a business or what a property owner wants to do with their property within code, within reason. And so I think that there are some kind of basic fundamental things. And I started here in 2020, and before that, I did watch it years ago on television, but I still I can't say that I had a full understanding of what the Planning Commission actually did or didn't do or could do or in general. So I guess my question is, do we have a simplified slide deck that just kind of in real layman terms kind of bullet points or boils down all of what we do into just a slide or two or three?
The Planning Commission, what the Planning Commission does.
Yeah, because
yeah. Laura, would you say that that's what the Land Use 101 covers, at least it briefly covers that?
I would say yes, that is what it covers, but it's also probably too technical. We do our best to try to make it as technical as it is, but it's just technical. So maybe it would be useful. I think it's an interesting idea, kind of like we can explain what the Planning Commission's role is, but what we don't do is say what the Planning Commission's role isn't. So maybe there should be some more information about what it is that the Planning Commission isn't responsible for, so that that's kind of more clear to folks. And then maybe try to, instead of just focusing on the technicalities of the land use process, kind of remove the technical bit and try to put it in layman's terms, going back to this idea that it's such a technical kind of review process. And it's still, Land Use 101 is still way in the weeds of technical information because it is a technical thing, like we said. But maybe there is a way to try to pull ourselves out of that really technical language and try to be a little bit more clear to someone who doesn't understand of what the Planning Commission's role is and isn't.
And it looks like it's a video, and videos are great and wonderful, but if it was like a slide deck of just 3 to 5 slides and just kind of those bullet points of here's what we do, here's what we don't do, here's the process, here's why we ask to stick to the applicable criteria because we can't consider things outside of that, just some of those bullet point things, and a slide deck of just 3 or 5 slides that are very clear. I can promote that online and in communities because that would also help me, because I do get a lot of communication from community members asking or frustrated because, construction projects are going on and we have nothing to do with that. So that would be helpful. And if the city is wanting to make some of those slides, I would love to volunteer and spend an hour or two kind of going through that and helping take that complicated language and really just kind of bullet pointing it down so that a wide variety of people can read or see it and understand it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Commissioner Ern. Yeah. I'm going to move Commissioner Freeman, your hand's raised.
Yeah, I'll just make it quick. I agree that we need to kind of make it a little easier for some of the people who are coming to testify, simplify some of these concepts. And I was just thinking people who've ever gone to jury duty and stuff, that could be the first time and it's really scary. And like when you go in there, the judge, the judge like really pares it down and makes it in simple terms to kind of understand these complex situations. And I was just thinking, if people are coming to testify, maybe that's something the city attorney can do and say, look, this is what we're here. This is what we're here for. This is what we can listen to. These are the things that we can take testimony on, or this can help us make our decision. But something like that, I would think would be helpful for people who are coming in. The city attorney can just kind of say, okay, these are complex concepts, but let's talk about them in everyday talk, just to make it a little less intimidating. Thanks.
I think you're right, Commissioner Freeman. This is great. I think I want to move on to the next topic because I feel like we've got some really good feedback there that we can continue to talk through with staff.
Chair Roosevelt,
Laura.
if I may ask a question.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see. Yeah, I cannot see the dais at all. So
That's okay.
Commissioner
I wasn't going to
Hemer.
hold my hand up for an hour either.
Good.
So Laura, let me, this is for staff. Do all NDAs get every code amendment? So for example, the downtown code, did that go out to all the NDAs?
An email does go out telling people that that's happening. Yeah. We always try to send emails out to all the NDAs about things that are happening.
And do we request the land use chairs to comment on those?
We always invite people to go to the website and see, when they can participate, because we have hearings, and yes, you can provide comments.
Okay, and then the only time that they get a direct communication is when something is actually happening in their neighborhood, is that correct? Or is it all done by email? I think you guys quit mailing it out.
Down through there's a notification process that goes out. There's a referral process, so you get land use referrals when things come in and that are in neighborhoods. They do go out to the neighborhood association, and then there's a notification process for 300 feet within the property, and so there's that notification process. But I will say that yes, so people do get notified. What they get notified about is pretty complicated, so it's not.
No, I hear you. So, I've been going to my Linwood NDA for about 12 or 13 years. We don't get a lot of land use issues out there. Not a lot happens. So we don't really talk about a lot of land use issues. And I agree with the concept that it is very, very complicated. It took me 2 years to figure out the language of planning. But what I also, I worry about two things. One, that the NDAs don't think that we care what their testimony is, because it doesn't matter what they say, we're not going to listen to them. Mm-hmm. And then two, I also think that the barrier is that it's just not really worth our time to comment because it is too complicated, or you don't have enough time in the meeting to talk about it. Or because it happens so quick from the time that we get the thing that we don't have enough time to talk about it in the meeting because the meeting's already full and we don't have enough. And so I think that there are barriers that search around that. And what bothers me the most, and for all you NDA leaders, is what bothers me the most, is that the lack of NDA participation in the hearings that we have. We don't even get notes back, an email back saying, oh, this is fine, or we don't like this, very often, which either means that the system is broken, right? Or we as a commission don't take them seriously enough that they feel like it's worth their time. I don't know where that falls in. And I wish that there were more NDA representatives here so that we could have a little bit more conversation, because I think the truth of the matter is that it's either our fault because of either time or because when I say we, commission, planning staff, that we don't listen, we don't give enough time, or maybe even the notification process may be a little broken.
I can't speak to the first 2 points, but notification process, and I do think there is clear notification about what's happening. But to your point, it is complicated, and so going through a packet that's 120 pages is hard for folks to do. So maybe what we need to do is we probably, and I know that this is something that had been done in the past, and I know it's a document that we have somewhere on our website, and we've talked about this, and Ryan's been helping me with this stuff, thinking about, so you've received the land use, referral. What do I do now? And so we probably need to go back to that and talk a little bit about training some folks on how to handle that. But it is complicated because, to your point earlier, we are on a legal timeline.
Right.
We can't slow down the process in order for people to really be able to absorb it. So there has to be kind of a dedication from some folks, quite frankly, in the NDAs that are willing to take on that role, kind of like Chair Edge or Vice Chair Edge talked about within a CPO, saying that in the NDA, we're going to be sure that somebody who's dedicated to really reviewing these. And then calling staff and asking questions, because staff is always, you're probably going to get more information by calling staff and asking questions than you are by quicker information, more easily digestible information than you are going to be application.
Right, and so I'm assuming that they get the exact same packet that we get. So you get the summary, right, the city summary? Or do you just send them out the land use application?
Send them a message to the staff report. It's the staff report. You get a link to the staff report.
All right.
So, and if there's anywhere to focus, it's that we will always want to focus on the staff report. Like, look at what's going on.
Right, because that's the simple.
That identifies
That's the simple language. And
yes.
then the key questions are listed at the
Yes.
bottom of that, right? Which then gives you a prompt
Yes.
to be able to look at that. Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. And that gets sent out 3 weeks before the hearing, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the rule?
Yes, that is the rule.
Yeah, and I think that, once again, maybe that is a bit of the piece of the barrier, because the simple language is there, right? But that 3 weeks does certainly present an issue, unless if the NDAs give their land use chair carte blanche to let them make independent decisions, to send in an email in the name of the NDA, right? I just want to encourage our NDA folks to, I believe in public comment and feedback, and I really appreciate it when the NDA send it in.
I do think NDA leaders, I've heard in the past that they feel like it's not their job to comment in general because they don't want to show bias they feel like they're like an employee of the city. And they kind of feel like they can't sometimes speak out against. I mean, they can be more supportive, but I think they're more reluctant to speak out against something. It's been my experience. Well, you can speak individually no matter what, but you can't represent your neighborhood unless everybody says, I think this is a good idea, let's vote on it. But that voting may be 10 people, 15 people.
Right.
So, it's not a perfect world.
Commissioner Sherman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Losfeld. I think following up maybe a little bit on Commissioner Hemer's comments, it would almost be interesting to think about creating so you're mad about this land use proposal, what do you do? Kind of one page for community members. Just, thinking about what is that kind of step-by-step process that someone would take. And I say that, as a former chair of my neighborhood association when I lived in Portland, I felt we had maybe a little bit more resources. We could turn to Southeast Uplift, and they had paid planner on staff who could help strategize and help me think about those proposals. And there were city staff I felt like I could always call and get a perspective. But, as a smaller community, I think that is a little bit more challenging for folks. And if folks don't feel like they have a clear path to kind of engage and show up, then folks say, why would I? Anyways, I was just wanted to, suggest, if we did maybe spell it out, or provide a little bit more advice on how folks could kind of go about advocating for those perspectives that they might have. We might hear from more folks.
I want to move to the next question that I have for you all, which is, are there general topics, Rebecca, Teresa, or code questions, not necessarily related to a specific project, that you or others have interest in discussing with the Planning Commission? Maybe there are certain topics that seem to repeat themselves, or others that are just real hot points for the group. I wonder if anything might come to your mind. You mentioned the tree code, Teresa, for sure.
Well, that's already passed, so, but yes.
Right.
I'd say the majority of people definitely were against that. And I'm sure other people thought it was a good idea, but if you have a lot of trees in your yard already, and somebody else doesn't like trees, they don't have any trees, but the burden is on the person that owns all these trees to take care of them. But they don't want to pay for a permission to take a tree down. But that's done. So we should move on to another subject. Let's see, what was I thinking about? I didn't really know I was going to be speaking tonight. I thought it was just going to be a casual meeting. No, I'm supposed to know things in my head. So, but I do think Brett Kelter coming tomorrow is a good start. I think we should be regularly hearing from planning staff. And I think in the past they've been maybe, I don't know if that, because years ago I was involved with Lake Road. And I don't really remember a planning coming. Of course, it's been a long time ago. But yes, I say for them to come. You know, I know there's a lot of 7 neighborhoods, maybe, once a month, but not in the summer and all that. I think more communication is key for interaction with the Planning Commission. I think that's very important.
Okay. Rebecca, would you add anything to that?
I think it would be helpful to have and not regarding specific decisions per se, but just around tricky pieces of the process. So, having the staff report is great, but sometimes it's difficult for NDAs to navigate specific variances, how that plays into code, the input that we might receive and how to filter that appropriately into the process. It's almost like you need one of those "you are here" maps, that kind of talks through all right, so you have the staff report. That means that the application has already been submitted. That means that there has been some analysis that's already been done. Now you have 3 weeks of a period of time where you may hear input. We had a situation last year where, there are some tricky pieces of Llewellyn, not only the patchwork quilt of unincorporated areas, but we also have Johnson Creek. We have the actual creek, the boulevard. So we had a situation where, we were helping some folks who came to the NDA to be heard, thinking that was going to be their point of influence into the discussion. Where they really needed to go to the Planning Commission or speak to one of the planning staff. But we had to sit down basically and determine where they were in that map, right? Well, we had the staff report, then we looked at the website and said, well, the hearings have, the first and the second hearing have happened. And then we contacted the planner and then found out that now the hearing was going to be postponed. And so they had an opportunity to be, to provide comment, which, I forget who said, I think maybe it was Commissioner Freeman that said how intimidating that is. For anyone, but your level of familiarity with navigating the system and where you are in that process, I think can definitely compound that anxiety for folks. So I think, we're lucky to have a few historians that are in our NDA, but they won't always be there. So to have some resources that are available for anyone who is interested in becoming a land use chair or even a member of the committee or something along those lines, to be able to navigate those, like, the tricky parts that aren't always in the manual. I think that would be helpful for us.
Rebecca, I love that suggestion of making something visual that would accompany the staff report is kind of what I'm imagining, that would show folks what does the process look like from here now that you have this information. What does the process look like, and what are your windows for comment or feedback? And if not, what happens at the end of this process? So I think that could be really key. I believe that the staffing reports are a great way to understand the whole context of the project and the application. I think work could be done there, however, to make those documents, as John had said, with greater use of plain language, something that is more accessible. I find them challenging at times and hard to follow. We had difficulty with language in one of the most recent applications that was confusing to seasoned commissioners and folks who do this for a living. So I do think, although Laura, I'm imagining, this is certainly a different, it's additional work and effort. But I think broadening and making that language more accessible in something that's distributed to the broader community would be valuable work to making folks feel as though they can engage in these conversations more openly.
I will say, yes, that it's a little tricky, and I don't disagree that we should find better ways to communicate these complicated subjects. The flip side of that is that we're creating a legal record that is very technical in language. So we have to be very specific about some language that we use, because we're following the code and we're following a process and we're following the way we have to analyze it. So it's tricky. So, but I do agree, maybe there is a way, going back to that, you've received your land use notification. Now what? It kind of goes back to that. Let us walk you through what that process looks like. So there may be some sort of better middle ground, with the understanding that it's probably never going to be a kind of like the level between a 4th and 8th grade reading ability as was talked about earlier, just because it's a legal document. I think we can strive to do better and to kind of develop some sort of tools that can help people navigate a little bit more.
Laura, I guess what I'm asking is there a document or a visual aid or something that can be recreated that's not necessarily part of the legal documentation of a project?
Yes, I do believe that that's something that we can, because we have kind of those processes already lined out, like what are the steps in a process, but we can kind of try to take that language. We have documents that shows exactly what it is, but then try to, again, take the technical bit out of it, try to kind of provide, and we could attach that somehow and say, this is where you are in this process. So yeah, there's something we can come up with, I think.
Okay.
With the application.
I'll move then to Vice Chair Edge.
Thank you, Chair. And just a thought on that, Laura, since, the same state law applies to all of the jurisdictions statewide, then I wonder if DLCD or other jurisdictions might have other materials that they'd be willing to share along those lines. Since, all of our timelines are all the same, so it could be relevant. The other thing I was just going to mention, this is tricky legal stuff. It is challenging, and certainly as a layperson, very, very challenging. As the chair of my CPO, like I said, neighborhood association equivalent at the county, and then, I'll be, I'm also very deeply involved in the land use side of that. I would be more than happy as, a private individual, as a volunteer in my community, doing similar work as the NDAs and the NDA land use, volunteers, make myself available to compare notes with, what does my organization do, and how do we respond to things, which again are strikingly similar, in Clackamas County as they are here, in Milwaukie. So, it'd be I'd be more than happy to compare notes and kind of share the materials, that we put out for our meetings and how we handle that, and, what works for us, and be able to respond to questions. And so I'm happy to make myself available. And if anyone at the NDAs is interested in that, you can reach out to us at contact@oakgrovebpo.org. Again, that's contact@oakgrovebpo.org. More than happy to, be a resource for the community and see, what we can do to help kind of increase the losing my words here because it's late at night. But anyway, just to help everyone kind of make better sense of how they can interact with the process, and how, where the influence is, and how to identify where that influence is, and then, leverage that as a community. So.
Thank you, Vice Chair Edge. And I would just encourage you, if you can, put it into chat, and that way people have another way of getting that email address. Commissioner Sherman?
Just maybe following on that, especially to Rebecca's comment about helping people navigate it. This might be less of a community involvement advisory committee topic and more of a city council topic, but it'd be interesting if there was some limited on-call support for NDAs to get a little bit of strategic land use advice as they might be thinking about the position community members want to take on some of these cases. Recognizing city staff probably can't get involved in that because, again, the legal process, but if there was, an on-call with an outside planner to be able to just help people navigate and think about some of those steps, just could be an interesting thing for helping people build those skill sets and that knowledge base to be more informed. So thought I'd just kind of throw that out there again, recognizing it's probably outside of our scope to make those budget decisions, but just knowing that, when people have a hard time navigating the process, they often just don't even engage.
Well, Rebecca and Teresa, I think that was those were kind of the main topics that we wanted to cover with you all. I want to say we appreciate you staying up late with us and having this conversation, and we would hope to keep this conversation going, and anything that you can do to encourage other folks to join in these meetings or other planning commission meetings. We very much value the feedback and the time of the NDAs in this process.
Thank you.
Since we have our NDA meeting tomorrow night, and I'll give them an update on this conversation, I just have one question, kind of going back, I think, to Commissioner Hemer, who said that he really appreciated having feedback from the NDAs on these decisions. Would you prefer that like, in a situation where we are able to provide feedback, would you prefer that to be something that's emailed, or that the NDAs, contribute like during the CIAC portion? What would work best for you?
I'll speak for myself, but in any way that you can give it, it is valued. We read through the entire packet, and if there is an email, we will see it and we will read it. We certainly love the opportunity for you to come testify, and have had real success when NDA members represent the voice of the group during testimony. And there can be the potential opportunity to then hear what the applicant has to say, to then have comment and feedback. We've seen it work and be beneficial to both sides to have your voice represented in the room. I don't know if other commissioners want to add anything to that, but I would say in any way that is accessible to you, we will take it and we appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Or that,
I think
more,
that,
any information is better than no information, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
whatever works for you to be able to participate is great. In a perfect world, I think that pairing written testimony with oral testimony is incredibly powerful. Particularly when, in writing, you can worry about getting all of the code numbers right and saying, we're talking about this one, this standard and this standard and this standard, and in testimony, you can be a little bit more, you can fall back on having the reference of that already documented in our packet, and then your oral testimony can just be a little bit more about the feeling or about, you don't have to hit all your points in the oral testimony when you've got it paired with written testimony. And so I feel that's a very potent strategy that I like to employ a lot.
Yeah, and Vice Chair Edge, the only thing that I would say to maybe amend that is I don't even want to imply that you have to know the code or the section of the code. I would say voicing any opinion or feedback, however that might come. I don't care to know the code. That's part of our job, right? That's our filter. I think that's probably what you meant.
Ideally, yes. But not all planning commissions, not all review authorities. I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody in other jurisdictions, but if you're ever dealing with another jurisdiction, that can be very helpful to be able to guide the review authority to the specific criteria. And so don't underestimate the power of that, but also Chair Loosevelt's absolutely right. It's not your job to cite the criteria. So it's a balancing act, but I think that when you're able to really put something, like I said, ideal scenario, where you really put something powerful in writing and then come in and really hammer it home in oral testimony is a very potent way to deliver testimony.
Is that helpful, Rebecca?
Yep, it is. Thank you for having us here tonight.
Thank you all. Thank you, Teresa, in the room. I can't see you, but appreciate you coming out. And have a great night, both of you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is other business. Commissioner Sherman?
Just a piece of other business, and hopefully before some of our NDA folks have left. I'm not sure if everybody is aware, but TriMet has released a concept plan for future service. I can drop a link in the chat. I know Vice Chair Edge has seen it. There's some, I'd say, significant improvements in terms of service planning for Milwaukie. This is just a concept, and it is probably going to change. TriMet is having several open houses about this, including one located in our community at the end of the month. And so if community members want to participate in that, that's Wednesday, October 26th, from 5 to 7 at Clackamas Community College Harmony. And you can find information on TriMet's website, trimet.org/forward, which I'll also drop in the chat. And I'd love to hear if planning staff have any perspective on this or engaging with TriMet on any of this.
Side note, that's my building. I designed that building, and it's a great space. Thank you for dropping the link into the chat. I'm opening it up here, and I think this is great information to have. Is there any other business?
I do, Chair.
Yeah, of course. Well, I can't
This
see
is
you,
Laura's
so
favorite.
I'm gonna move on. Go ahead, Commissioner
It
Humer.
is election season, and before everybody freaks out, I'm not going to talk about the election itself, but the Linwood NDA is hosting a candidate debate on October 19th, 5:30 at our beautiful Leading Library. There are two candidates that are running unopposed. They'll be given 5 minutes. The other two contested positions for mayoral and council position 2, we'll actually have a real debate with about 5 questions with a 3-minute initial response and then a 3-minute rebuttal or their own particular response. So come on down. It is live at the Leading Library, 5:30. That is Wednesday, October 19th. Or you can watch it live on Zoom as well. Go to the city calendar and click on the Linwood NDA Zoom link. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hemer. Appreciate that. Anyone else? All right. Forecast for future meetings.
All right, great. So next Planning Commission meeting on October 26th, we've got the Downtown Design Review Code Amendments, as well as the Electrical Vehicle Charging Code Amendments. And we have a tentatively scheduled work session with the city manager and Ober to talk about the parks discussion. And then on November 8th, we have 2 variances for hearings. We'll also be talking, the consultants will be here that are working on the housing needs and housing production strategy to give you an overview of where we are on that work. And then possibly Ryan will be here again for, to talk more about code amendments regarding, related to the climate-friendly, equitable communities code that is coming down the pike. And that's it,
Laura. Thank you. I have one comment, Laura, if the team or the group could look into this mic feedback.
No, we weren't going to look into that. We just thought we'd let those. Yes, we will look into that. Definitely.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's very distracting, and I'm hopeful just take a look into it. It would be helpful.
You know, if everybody was here live, we would not even have this issue.
Yeah, but we are trying to create an equitable solution where everybody can engage at their available time and ability here, Mr. Hemer.
If it's guaranteed under 2 hours, I'll be there.
Yeah.
2 hours is like my max in person.
See? I agree. Commissioner Sherman?
Just going back real quick on the TriMet topic. Is staff engaging in conversations with TriMet about future plans? And I'm just partially wondering, like, does the Planning Commission want to put a letter together saying, TriMet, we like your service concept for the city of Milwaukee? I could see something like that being valuable, officially having the city of Milwaukee weighing in on their service planning concepts. So I'd just be curious if anything like that is already happening or not.
Sorry, I didn't, if directed at me, Commissioner Sherman, I only heard about half of it. Sorry, it's not easy to hear in this room either. I think that you're talking about the TriMet and whether or not the city is going to be supportive of the new transit plan that is being proposed. And I do know that our assistant city manager, Kelly Brooks, has been attending those meetings, although I don't know exactly what formal feedback we'll be giving, but I can follow up with her and see what if any, we'll be doing.
There you go. I will take a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do I have a second? Please. Just gonna leave. You're killing me. Just somebody.
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Bye.
Aye. Good night, everybody.
Hi.
No, I.